South Carolina. Spanish moss, sweet tea, and front porches where strangers wave you down just to say good morning. But beneath the charm lies something else. Centuries of war, slavery, and piracy left marks that never faded. Scattered across the back roads and coastal highways sit taverns, inns, and watering holes where the locals will serve you a drink with a smile, but will not stay after the sun goes down. Porch ceilings are painted haint blue because the Gullah people believed it was the only color that could keep the dead from crossing the threshold. These are not ghost tours. These are operating businesses with histories that go back centuries. Now, let us begin. Number 15. We start on United States Route 301 in Ulmer, a tiny community in rural Allendale County. The truck stop that once stood here was a thriving pit stop for long-haul drivers and traveling families. Before the interstate system, Route 301 was the primary north-south corridor for traffic moving between the northeastern United States and Florida. Thousands of vehicles pass through Ulmer daily. Motels, diners, and fuel stations lined the road for miles. Then, in the 1960s and the 1970s, Interstate 95 was built, and it drained the life out of every business on the old route overnight. The truck stop died with the road. What remains today is a hollowed-out concrete shell. Grass pushes through the cracked car park. A faded sign hangs at an angle above a door that no longer closes. The dining counter sits exactly where it was left, dusted with decades of neglect. These skeletal roadside structures still line South Carolina's forgotten corridors. Silent monuments to commerce that simply stopped one day and never started again. An abandoned truck stop is eerie enough when it is empty. But what about a roadside establishment where the previous owner still refuses to leave? Number 14. On United States Route 17 in Georgetown County sits the North Santee General Store. This building has been serving travelers and locals since 1929. It sits along a stretch of highway flanked by salt marsh and longleaf pine, far removed from any town of meaningful size. For nearly a century, it has been the only reliable stop for miles in either direction. It sells food, drinks, fuel, and souvenirs. But it also comes with something not listed on any receipt. Employees have given the name Mary Jane to a presence that has occupied the store for as long as anyone can remember. She rattles the doorknobs. She fiddles with the crock-pot dials. She calls employees by name in the middle of empty afternoons. Occasionally, she appears as a dark shadow that moves between the shelves and vanishes. Nobody knows who Mary Jane was in life. A ghost that rattles doorknobs is unsettling. But further down the coast, there is an inn where the spirit waits for the full moon. Number 13. In Mount Pleasant, just across the Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge from Charleston, stands the Old Village Post House Inn. It once operated under the name Guild's Inn, and under that name it was featured in a published guide to haunted establishments of the American Southeast. The spirit is believed to be that of Captain Samuel Guilds, a former owner. According to documented accounts, the best time to encounter Captain Guilds is during a full moon. A ghost that keeps to a schedule. A ghost that appears on schedule is peculiar. But on Hilton Head Island, there is a restaurant haunted by a grief so powerful it survived the demolition of the original building. Number 12. CQ's restaurant on Hilton Head Island was constructed in the 1960s using timber salvaged from two older harbor townhouses. Those original homes had been suspected of harboring a spirit long before the restaurant existed. The ghost is believed to be Carolina Fripp. In 1898, her father, a lighthouse captain, suffered a fatal heart attack while battling to keep the light burning during a hurricane. Carolina pulled his lifeless body from the ocean. She never recovered. When CQ's was assembled from the old materials, the spirit came with them. Staff have reported water taps turning on by themselves, radio switch stations with no one nearby. Photographs taken inside have captured unexplained orbs of light in nearly every room. They call her the Blue Lady. A ghost that clings to the very timber of a building is haunting. But in Charleston, there is a restaurant where the spirit has been appearing to guests, staff, and even the police for nearly 70 years. Number 11. At 72 Queen Street in Charleston stands Poogan's Porch. The building was originally a private residence, erected in 1891. Two sisters lived here, Zoe St. Amand, born in 1879, and her companion Liz. After their parents died, the sisters continued living together. Then Liz passed away in 1945. Zoe remained alone for nearly a decade. Neighbors reported seeing her staring from the upstairs windows for hours, calling out her dead sister's name into the empty rooms. Zoe died in 1954, but she never left. She has been spotted peering at diners from around corners, walking through the front door like a customer, and pushing people on the staircase. Late at night, guests at the Mills House Hotel across the street have seen an old woman in a black dress waving from the second floor of the restaurant. Believing an elderly patron had been locked inside, they called the police. Officers arrived, searched the building, and found it completely empty. This has happened more than once. The responding officers filed reports each time, and the descriptions matched across incidents separated by years. The restaurant is also home to a second ghost. Poogan himself was a stray terrier who adopted the restaurant as his home. He died in 1979. Diners still report feeling a gentle brush against their legs just as their meals arrive. They look down, expecting to see a dog. There is nothing there. A spinster and a stray dog, both refusing to leave the only home they ever loved. But what happens when the spirit is furious, and the building it haunts has been serving drinks since before the American Revolution? Number 10. On East Bay Street in Charleston stands Miss Crady's Tavern and the Long Room. This building was constructed during the second half of the 1700s. In 1778, Edward McCrady purchased the property. McCrady was a barber, a vintner, a tavern keeper, and a veteran of the Revolutionary War. He constructed the famous Long Room, completed in 1788. In 1791, the Society of the Cincinnati held a formal dinner there for President George Washington during his tour of the southern states. Washington dined in this room. Then the building was abandoned, left to rot for years. It was eventually added to the National Register of Historic Places and restored. But the years of emptiness left their mark. The Long Room does not feel empty even when it is. Staff working alone after closing have reported the sensation of being observed from multiple directions simultaneously. Cold spots appear and vanish without any change in ventilation. The air itself seems to carry weight in certain corners, as though something occupies the space without being visible. A tavern where the first American president once dined, left abandoned for decades. But further up the coast, there is a Victorian house where the ghosts do not merely appear, they interact. Number 9. On Highway 17 in Little River sits the Brentwood Restaurant, widely considered the most haunted restaurant in all of South Carolina. The house was built in the early 1910s by Clarence and Essie McCorsley. When Clarence died unexpectedly, Essie turned it into a boarding house for traveling fishermen. She ran it with strict discipline for decades. Essie died in 1974, but her presence has never ceased. Staff arriving for early morning shifts have heard what sounds like a full dinner party taking place inside. Laughter, clinking glasses, the murmur of conversation. They unlock the door and find the restaurant completely empty. Security cameras have recorded unexplained orbs of light in every room. A dark shadow has been seen ascending the staircase on multiple occasions. But the most remarkable detail involves direct communication. The spirit playfully splashed the owner with water from the dishwasher. He asked Essie out loud to please not startle him anymore. She stopped. She listened. That implies intelligence. That implies she is still there, still aware, still running her house. A ghost that listens when you ask her to stop. And in Charleston, there is a tavern where the spirits reach out and touch you. Number 8. At 36 Broad Street in Charleston sits the Blind Tiger Pub. In 1893, Governor Benjamin Tillman banned private alcohol sales across the entire state. Speakeasies sprang up across Charleston in response. They were called blind tigers. The name referred to a common ruse of the era. Operators would charge customers admission to see a supposed curiosity, a blind tiger, a striped pig, or some other invented attraction. The price of the ticket included a complimentary drink. It was a loophole, a way to serve alcohol without technically selling it. Nearly a century later, a legal pub opened on the same street and took the old name. The building carries the energy of that lawless era. A ghost in a black dress has been sighted repeatedly near the bar. One woman reported that her hair was suddenly pulled with enough force to jerk her head backward. Nobody was standing near her. Other patrons have heard loud footsteps directly behind them. They turn around and find the space completely empty. Having your hair pulled by an invisible hand is terrifying. But on the Sea Island south of Charleston, the Gullah people have been warning about something far worse for centuries. And they paint their porches a very specific color to keep it out. Number 7. Along the Sea Islands of the South Carolina Lowcountry, a spiritual tradition has persisted for centuries. The Gullah Geechee people are descendants of enslaved Africans who preserved their ancestral languages, customs, and spiritual beliefs in remarkable detail. In their tradition, when a person dies, a good spirit ascends. But a bad spirit lingers. It becomes what is known as a boo hag. In Gullah belief, it is a skinless entity that slips into homes through the smallest crack while the occupant sleeps. It sits on the chest of the living and steals their breath. The phrase "do not let the hag ride ya" became a common warning passed from generation to generation along these islands. To combat these spirits, the Gullah people developed specific protections. Cobalt blue glass bottles hung from tree branches near doorways. The bottles are believed to trap wandering spirits inside where the morning sun destroys them. Porch ceilings were painted in a shade known as haint blue. This color was believed to mimic water, and spirits, according to tradition, cannot cross water. These are not decorations, they are defenses, and they have been in continuous use for over 300 years. The Gullah people built these protections from centuries of experience, and on Pawleys Island, there is an inn where those protections were never installed. Number 6. On Myrtle Avenue on Pawleys Island sits the Pelican Inn. This beachfront bed and breakfast was built in the 1840s, making it one of the oldest lodging structures on the Grand Strand. It is believed to be haunted by its former owner, a Confederate soldier who never left when the war ended. Guests have reported heavy footsteps in unoccupied hallways, doors that open and close on their own, a ghostly pair of dogs that appear and vanish in the corridors. Nearby stood the Hermitage, where a young woman named Alice Flagg once lived. Alice fell in love with a lumberman considered beneath her station. Her family forbade the match. She fell ill and died. Her brother found her lover's ring on a ribbon around her neck and threw it into the marsh. They say Alice still walks the grounds at night, searching the mud for the ring that was stolen from her body. A Confederate soldier who will not leave his inn, and a young woman searching a marsh for a stolen ring. But back in Charleston, there is a building that has housed sailors, prostitutes, gamblers, and a female pirate. And it has been standing since 1712. Number 5. At 17 Chalmers Street in Charleston stands the Pink House. Built in 1712, it is one of the oldest surviving structures in the city. Over 3 centuries, this Bermuda pink building has served as a tavern, a brothel, and an art gallery. Its history includes documented murders, suicides, and unexplained disappearances. Windows burst open without warning. The sound of footsteps climbing the staircase is heard regularly when employees are alone. Visitors have described an uncomfortable sensation crawling down their spine, as though someone is watching them from the stairwell. One of the most persistent legends involves the pirate Anne Bonny. She is said to have lived on the 3rd floor and conducted her business from within these walls. Bonnie was one of the most notorious female pirates of the 18th century, known for her violent temperament and her refusal to conform to any expectation placed upon her. If even a fraction of the legends are true, the energy she left behind in this building would be considerable. 300 years of suffering soaked into one building is disturbing. But that is not the most haunted tavern in Charleston. That distinction belongs to a building on Church Street, where a woman killed by lightning still walks the halls, and her feet no longer reach the floor. Number 4. Henry's on Market is the oldest continuously operating restaurant in the state of South Carolina. Its founder, Henry O. Hasselmeyer, started with a grocery and retail liquor store before opening what would become Henry's Restaurant. Henry was one of the top players in the Charleston bootlegging trade. He was arrested repeatedly. Every single time he pleaded guilty, paid a $100 fine, and went straight back to selling illegal liquor. Henry died eventually, but the mischief did not stop. During the very first ghost tour held at the restaurant, a small fire broke out at the top of the staircase the moment the guide finished the opening introduction. There was no clear source, no electrical fault, no candle. Thick smoke filled the room, but there was no structural damage. The bootlegger who could not be stopped by the law apparently could not be stopped by death either. A bootlegger whose ghost sets fires in his own restaurant. But the most unsettling tavern ghost in all of Charleston is not a bootlegger. She is a woman named Nettie. Number 3. On Church Street in Charleston stands the Dock Street Theater. Originally opened in 1736, it was the first building in America designed specifically for theatrical performances. The structure burned down. It was rebuilt. It burned again. The current building incorporates elements of the Planters Hotel, constructed on the site in 1809. The most famous spirit here is Nettie Dickerson. One evening, while standing on the second-floor balcony during a violent storm, she was struck by lightning and killed instantly. Her ghost has been sighted on the second floor ever since. She is described as a red-haired woman wearing a red dress. But the strangest detail reported by multiple independent witnesses over many decades is this. Nettie is only visible from the knees up. The lower portions of her legs pass through the floor itself. In 1936, the building was renovated and the floor level was raised by approximately 1 foot. Nettie is walking on the original floorboards, the ones that were there when she was alive. She does not know they have been moved. She is locked in her own time. The theater is also haunted by a second presence, Junius Brutus Booth, father of John Wilkes Booth, the man who assassinated President Abraham Lincoln. Junius Brutus Booth was one of the most celebrated Shakespearean actors of the 19th century. He performed at the Dock Street Theater during the height of his career, and he was known for erratic, intense behavior both on and off the stage. A figure in a frock coat and top hat has been seen walking across the stage. Actors have reported feeling breath on the backs of their necks when no one is behind them. A woman walking on floors that were removed nearly a century ago. That is the third most unsettling tavern in South Carolina. The next one is worse, because the ghosts there are not trapped in the past. They are active in the present. Number 2. In the small upstate mill town of Lyman sits the Walnut Lane Inn, or rather, what is left of it. The inn is now permanently closed. The business failed. The guests stopped coming, but the other occupants never departed. One presence is described as a shapeless man who spent his time in the kitchen. Not a figure, not an outline, a shapeless form. Something without defined edges that occupied space where a person should have been. Another presence has been spotted on the staircase. A woman in dark skirts appears on the steps, and then is simply gone. Dogs brought into the building barked at empty doorways. They refused to enter certain rooms. They whimpered and pulled their owners toward the exit. The inn closed its doors for good. The shapeless man remained. The woman on the stairs remained. The ghosts outlasted the business. A shapeless man in a kitchen. A woman on the stairs. an inn so thoroughly occupied by the dead that even the dogs could not bear to be inside. And now we come to the final entry on this list. Number 1. On St. Helena Island, deep in the Lowcountry, a narrow road winds through a tunnel of live oak trees draped in Spanish moss so thick it brushes the roofs of passing cars. This is Land's End Road. During the daytime, it is staggeringly beautiful. The moss hangs low. The light filters through in broken golden columns. Marsh stretches out on either side toward the horizon. But after dark, this becomes something else entirely. There are no streetlights, no houses for long stretches, no sound except the wind and the occasional splash of something unseen in the water. Partway down the road stand the ruins of the Chapel of Ease. Built in 1740 to serve planters who lived too far from the parish church in Beaufort, the chapel was constructed of tabby, a crude concrete made from oyster shells, lime, sand, and water. It served the community for over a century before burning in 1868. The walls remain, the roof does not. Adjacent to the ruins sits a mausoleum. During the Civil War, Union soldiers broke into the crypt to search for valuables. When groundskeepers later sealed the entrance with fresh bricks, they returned the following morning to find every single brick removed and stacked in a neat pile on the ground. They sealed it again. The bricks were removed again. This cycle continued until the workers abandoned the effort entirely and never came back. Visitors have reported hearing singing from inside the roofless walls. An apparition of a woman in white has been seen walking through the cemetery carrying an infant. Further down the road, floating lights have been reported hovering over the marsh. Some say it is the ghost of a murdered Confederate soldier carrying a lantern, searching for his severed head. Others say it is the ghost of an enslaved man, still looking for the family that was taken from him. This is deep Gullah country. Every spiritual tradition discussed earlier converges here. The haint blue paint, the bottle trees, the boohags, they all originate from these islands. At the very end of Land's End Road, there is nothing, just marsh and salt water and silence. And a mausoleum that has been sealed and resealed for over 150 years. Every single time, the bricks are found in a pile on the ground by morning. Nobody has ever explained it. And if you drive Land's End Road after dark, you will be the only living person on it.